What's up, family? What's up? This is Juan J coming at you for real talk commentary. It's good to be here. I know it's kind of late, but I wanted to come to you and I want to deal with that slave code like I said I was going to do. I just think that we need to deal with this slave code. Again, I will be dealing with this book right here. The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice. Please get this book. The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice. Please get this book. I'm going to say this again. Please get this book. The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice. I'm tired. I'm very tired. But you can't let tiredness keep you from doing what needs to be done. So with that said, let me say this. I wrote that this book right here, I think it may be the last book to save humanity. Let me read you what I wrote. The law and slave codes, the last battle to save humanity. The destruction of this law and slave codes that have erased in a nation of black people worldwide under arrest and a spell. We have not dealt with the slave codes that have come out of America, Britain, Portugal, and Spain that have conquered African people worldwide. Spend the time, and you know that. He said, spend the time, you know that. Mickey Rose, thank you. Spend the time, and you know that. Spend the time wisely, okay. So look, with that said, we have not dealt with the slave code. We've dealt with the laws of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We've dealt with the Torahs. We've dealt with the Qurans. We know all the 10 Commandments. We know the Book of the Dead and the Dead Sea Scrolls, all the laws. But we have not dealt with this law, the penal code of the American or the black African slave trade worldwide. So look, please get this book. This is one of the few books I've ever read where I've actually shed tears. There's certain books you read, you just read for entertainment or you read for knowledge. But when you read this book right here, The American Slave Code in Theory and Practice, I promise you this, you're going to shed some tears. These are first-hand accounts of the laws that was enacted upon people of color. Correction, Africans, not people of color. I'm talking about Native African Americans, NAA, Native African Americans, who were either came off the ship or who was here prior to 1492. Again, your skin is what condemned you, not your religion. It was your skin. So let me start with this chapter 4. Get the book, chapter 4, page 283. Okay? The title was this: Subjection to all white persons. No, before I go there, let me deal with the introduction. I'm just going to read it so you get an idea of the book. The Honorable William J. to the author, which is William Goodell. He said, Reverend and dear sir, on returning the MSS of your American Slave Code in theory and in practice, I must ask you to accept my thanks for writing it, as well as for favoring me with this early perusal. Surely never before has mischief been framed by law with more diabolical ingenuity than in the infernal code. Your analysis of the slave laws is very able, and your exhibition of their practical applications by Southern courts and great careful research, right? It is more easy to make them to refute a charge of exaggeration against a work of fiction like Miss Stowe's. He said, but your book is an impregnable against such a charge as is Euclid's geometry, since like that it consists of propositions and demonstrations. He said, this book right here, get this book, everybody. It should be required reading for every African American under the sound of my voice, every native African American, every European. Everybody should be reading this book right here. It should be required reading. Every person of color that comes to this country who have no respect for the Native African Americans should read this book and know why and understand why this country still functions under the penal code of the American Slave Code. Again, I'm gonna keep reading. This book is not only true, but it is unquestionably true. You show us the rack constructed according to the law. We examine our leisures, the cruel but skillful machinery. We see the ministers of the law bind the victim on the instrument of torture. We see one feature of humanity after another crushed and obliterated, till at least an immortal man made a lower than the angels. And for those whose redemption the Son of God shed his blood on, the cross is converted into the beast of burden, a venerable animal, scourged at the will of its owner, and offered for sale in the market with horses and oxen. He's talking about us now. Your book would take from our northern dough-faced and slave catchers the flattering unction they are lying to their souls that Uncle Tom's Cabin is a gross exaggeration. That, of course, slavery is, after all, not so very bad, and that they, in doing its bidding, are not as base as they seem to be, right? You show them that the most educated and refined among the slaveholders have for the past century, as legislators, been deliberately enacting the most fiendish laws in utter defiance of moral sense of mankind and the precepts of the blessed gospel of the Lord Jesus. Did you hear that? And the precepts of the blessed gospel of the Lord Jesus. And that their grave and learned judge have enforced these accused statutes in all their rigor, thus giving them a solemn sanction to the atrocities portrayed by Miss Stowe and others without number, still more grieved by investing with them legal impunity. Let me keep reading. May God make your book a means of awakening the unconscious of our cotton divines to the deep sin of upholding in the name of the blessed and adorable Redeemer a system so damnable as American slavery, These reverent pro-slavery champions of Christianity resemble the priests of a juggernaut, recommending the worship of their God by pointing to the wretches writhing and shrinking and expiring under his car, that the blessings of God may rest on your labor for his glory, and the God of our suffering and oppressed brethren is the fervent prayer. Your friend and servant, William J. William J. That's just the letter, the intro letter from a Honorable William J., a judge, to the Reverend William Goodell. William Goodell wrote this book. Please get it. I'm gonna keep on showing it. I'm going to read the fourth chapter. I'm gonna start at the fourth chapter, page 283. I'm just gonna read because I think that me reading will be more poignant to the message I'm trying to convey to the people, because we have yet to deal with the slave codes in America, and we function still under the slave code. I'm gonna connect the dots that our good, born-again, white Christian brother is still functioning under the slave codes in theory and in practice, that the codes are not just on the book, that the codes are on their hearts. This may be the most important book in the 21st century. Okay, chapter 4. Chapter 4 says this. You see that? Subjection to all white persons. Get the book. Submission is required of all slaves, not to the will of the master only, but to the will of other white persons. Stroud, sketch, page 96 through 7. I'm going to say this again. Submission is required of the slave, not just to the will of the master, but to all white people. Okay? And it reads, in Georgia, it is enacted that if any slave shall presume to strike any white person, strike means to hit, such slave upon trial and conviction before the justice or justices, according to the direction of this act, shall for the first offense suffer such punishment as the said justice or justices shall in his or their discretion think fit, not extending to life or limb, and for the second offense shall suffer death. So the first offense, if any slave was to hit or strike a white person, that slave would lose a limb, any limb, fingers, wrist, arm, shoulder, leg, foot. And for the second offense, they should suffer death. Any white person, okay? Provided always that such striking be not done by the command in the defense of the owner of another person having the care and the government of such slave, in which case the slave shall be wholly excused, and the owner or other person shall be answerable as if the act had been committed by himself. That's in Prince Digest, page 450. What is it saying? If the slave struck a white person at the request of another white master, okay, he'd be given a break. But that master would have to pay the penalty, not the slave. Let me say this again. provided always that such striking be not done by the command in the defense of the owner or the person having the care and the government of such slave, in which the slave shall be wholly excused. So if the slave struck a white person on the behalf of another white person, then the slave will be excused. But the judgment would fall on the owner, the white slave owner. Just want to get that right. Again, I'm reading chapter 4, subjection to all white persons. South Carolina has an act in the same words, except that death is the penalty in the third offense instead of the second one. So South Carolina had on their books, if a slave struck a white person 3 times, the first time he lose a limb, the second time he may lose another limb, but the third time he'd get killed, he'd be dead. Versus in Georgia, if a slave struck a white person, he'd lose a limb. But if a slave struck a white person a second time, they kill him. I want you to know this. These are talking about our great ancestors, our great uncles, grandfathers, aunties, grandmothers. This is not no third person. This is our people, Native African Americans. We're talking about the slave is subject to all white people, not just a slave master. A little child, a little 5-year-old boy can tell a 39-year-old, a 65-year-old grown slave what to do. And if he didn't do it, he'd pay a price. Let me keep reading. In Maryland, for the same offense, the offender's ears may be cropped, though he be a free black. Article Acts of 1723, chapter 15, section 4. So in Maryland, if the black person was to strike a slave, they would crop his ears like these guys be cropping these pit bull dog ears. They would crop his ears. They take his ears off if you struck a white person. Let me keep reading. In Kentucky, there is the same prohibition. And as in Maryland, free colored persons are included. Penalty: 30 lashes on his or her back, well laid on. Okay? In Kentucky, it's the same prohibition. You cannot hit a white person. And if you did, as in Maryland, even free colored persons were included. The penalty: 30 lashes on his or her back, well laid on. Okay? Keep reading. In Virginia, the same as in Kentucky, from 1680 till 1792, when the following exception was added: except in those cases where it shall appear to said justice that such Negro or mulatto was wantonly assaulted and lifted his hand to his or her defense. What am I saying? I'm saying, family, if you raise your hand and you struck a white person, you're going to lose a limb. You may be whipped with 30 lashes. And for the second offense, you will be killed. Not for one person, any black person, any of our ancestors. I want to make the connection. Any of our ancestors. Okay? Watch this. In Maryland, if any slave shall happen to be slain for refusing to surrender him or herself contrary to law or in unlawful resisting any officer or other persons who shall endeavor to apprehend such slave or slaves, such officer or other person so killing such slave as aforesaid making resistance shall be, and by this act, indemnified from any prosecution for such killing. Exempt. Maryland Law Act 1751, Chapter 14, Section 9. This is cited by Judge Stroud as a specimen of the laws of several states, page 98-9. Okay, let me read this again. If any slave shall happen to be slain for refusing to surrender him or herself contrary to law or in any unlawful resistance, any officer or other persons, white person, who shall endeavor to apprehend slaves or slave, such officer or other person so killing such slave as aforementioned making resistance shall be exempt from any prosecution. They could kill us. They can kill our forefathers for even, they could kill us for family. Like they're doing right now. Every time you hear one of these unarmed black males and females being shot down in the street, unarmed, it's this. It's the law being made flesh on their hearts. It's not more so in the book no more. They still, in the subconscious, see us as slaves, not free men. You don't just gun down unarmed people, free people. You see them as slaves still. Okay? South Carolina Act of 1740. If any slave who shall be out of the house or plantation where such slave shall live or shall be usually employed, or without some white person in company with such slave, shall refuse to submit to undergo the examination of any white person, it shall be lawful for any white person to pursue, apprehend, and moderately correct such slave. And if slave shall assault and strike such white person, such slave may be lawfully killed. That's page 285. Brevards Digest 231. I'm going to read that again. South Carolina Law Act of 1740. If any slave who shall be out of the house or plantation where such slave shall live, or shall be usually employed, or without some white person in their company with such slave, and shall refuse to submit to undergo the examination of any white person, it shall be lawful for any such white person to pursue, apprehend, correct such slave, and if such slave shall assault and strike such white person, such slave shall be lawfully killed. I'm going to keep showing this book. You need to get this book. See, because when I read this book, I thought about my ancestors. The only reason why I'm here today. The only reason why you're here today. Because not just somebody survived the Middle Passage. Not because somebody didn't decide to jump over that boat. But somebody one of your great-great-great-grandmothers, or great-great-great-grandfathers, or great-great-great-uncles and cousins, when their feet touched the shore, instead of them deciding to take their lives, they hid. They had a baby, and they fed that baby, and that baby grew strong, and they bore another child, until you're here today. The only reason why you're here today is because somebody didn't kill themselves. You're not here because your mother and your father got together. That's part of the problem. That's part of the equation. But somebody survived the slave code, the penal slave code. Get the book. It should be required reading. Get the book. I'm gonna keep reading. It does not appear that any of these laws recognize or complement any self-defense by the slave, male or female, from the most villainous assaults of any white person except the Act of Virginia. And as the Negro or mulatto, whether bond or free, cannot lodge a complaint or even testify. You couldn't lodge a complaint or even testify. It is not easy to see how the exception can be made available for his or her benefit. Such laws illustrate the general position already laid down, that the government cannot secure to the master his assumed right of the slave ownership, and yet extend to the slave civil protection. The slaves had no protection, people. Our forefathers, our ancestors had no protection. Like we talking about, we are protected right now. We're a protected class of people. That we obey the laws of the land. That the laws protect us. The slave codes are still on the books, people. They can easily, any day, say, you know what, we're gonna go back to the slave codes. Okay? Watch this. If the Negro be chattel, he must needs be restrained from straying. Let me say this again. If the Negro is chattel, we must keep him from straying. He must be held subject like other domestic animals to the superior race holding dominion over him. It would be preposterous for the legislator to attempt doing this by a process which should at the same time provide for his protection as a man. Let me say this again. If the Negro be chattel, because they saw you as chattel, you saw our forefathers as chattel, and still too, he must be restrained from straying. You can't let him go nowhere. Keep him in the gate, on the plantation. He's safer on the plantation, because if he stray, and one of those, if any white person asks for his papers, who are you at, boy? Where you going? Who are you? And he doesn't respond appropriately, and he tries to run, and if he strikes the white person, and he gets killed, it's lawful. He must be held subject like other domestic animals. You know, when you domestic something, you neuter them. Like a cat can be neutered. A dog can be neutered. Can be spaded. Domesticate them. Make them comply. He must be held subject like other domestic animals to the superior race. To the superior race. Holding dominion over him. Family, let me be very clear. Let me say this. You can't make this up. I challenge all my white friends, all my black, all my native African Americans to ask any of your white friends, are we equal? Are we really equal? They're going to tell you no. Or they're going to tell you yeah, but with their fingers crossed behind their back. You can't see us equal when we're still being shot down like dogs in the streets. They just had a shooting in Chicago. Okay? Get the book. Get the book. It would be preposterous for the legislator to attempt doing this by a process which should at the same time provide for his protection as a man. Okay? It would be abusive to demand that it would be abusive to demand this at their hands if the relation of human chattelhood is to be held legal and innocent. Okay? Yet the existence of such laws render more than probable and even certain the common prevalence of the worst outrages that could be imagined. Okay, the best laws cannot fully protect the weaker portion of the community against the stronger. Let me say this again. The best laws cannot fully protect the weaker portion of the community against the stronger. Say it again. The best laws cannot fully protect the weaker portion of the community against the stronger. The weak must be left utterly defenseless when all protecting laws are only repealed. But the climax is reached when by the express statutes, each member of the weaker class is placed under the absolute control of any one of the dominant class. When resistance is forbidden on penalty of stripes and of cropping by the public authorities with the liability of being lawfully killed by the assailant. If the civil government were designed for human demoralization and torture, it is not easy to see how its ends could be more effectually reached. Let me say something. Again, there's only a few books I read where it brings me to tears. Because I'm not just reading a book. I'm reading laws that are on the books to this day. Laws. Laws that our good, born again, saved, Christian, white brethren enforced and still enforce in their actions. See, because the laws are written on their hearts now. It's binding on their hearts. So you don't have to go and pull up the statutes when they're on your heart. Just by how you interact with us, how you can sit back and watch us being killed like dogs in the street. It lets me know that the laws are in your heart. I will say this again. This is chapter 4 of the book, The American Slave Code, in Theory and in Practice. Get the book. Required reading for every black, white, Asian, Indian. Required reading. You cannot read this book and don't shed a tear. Because the ancestors, the pain, the suffering just comes off the pages. Watch this. That was chapter 4. This is chapter 5. Chapter 5 is this. Oh, no, that's chapter 4. I'm going backwards. Hold up. Chapter 5. Penal law. Penal law against slaves. The laws are unequal. Their administration is despotic. Their execution barbarous. Even this is succeeded by lynch law. Watch this, because my battery's going dead. Page 287. The slave who is but chattel on all other occasions, with not one solidarity attribute of personality, according to him, becomes a person whenever he is to be punished. Let me say this again. The slave who was but chattel on all other occasions, with not one solitary attribute of personality, according to him, becomes a person whenever he is to be punished. They only saw us as a person when it was time to punish us. Get the book. Required reading. Get the book. He is only being in the universe to whom is denied all self-direction and free agency, but who is nevertheless held responsible for his conduct and to the law. He is forbidden to read the law and kept as ignorant and as unenlightened as possible. He is nevertheless accounted criminal for acts which are deemed innocent in others and punished with severity from which all others are exempt. He is under the control of law through unprotected law and now law only as an enemy and not as a friend, and can be known only as an enemy and not as a friend, and can be known only as an enemy and not as a friend. Man, I don't know what to say sometimes, because I'm not just reading. I feel I'm saddened. I'm very saddened. And I think if you have this video, you watching this, I think you need to share this. Share this with as many people as you can. Share it. I'm going to talk about the slave code, and I'm going to back it up with David Walker's appeal. Because I've been instructed by the ancestors. Just read. Just read. I'm going to read this again. He is only in the universe to whom is denied of all self-direction and free agency, but who is nevertheless held responsible for his conduct in breaking the law. He is forbidden to read the law and kept as ignorant and as unenlightened as possible. He is nevertheless accounted criminal for acts which are deemed innocent in others and punished with severity from which all others are exempt. Talking about us. Much has been said of the disparity of punishment between the white inhabitants and the slaves and the Negroes of the same state. The slaves are punished with much more severity for the commissions of similar crimes by white persons than the latter, and that still goes on today. You know, they call black folks criminals. They call white people lawbreakers. White collar crime, they can steal millions and billions, and these guys get a slap on the wrist. With us, you go out here and sell some drugs, or, you know, a little petty little theft, they throw the book at you. Again, white folks are seen as lawbreakers. Black folks are seen as criminals for the same laws. It hasn't changed, family. These laws are written on the hearts of the people. Get the book. Please get the book. If you don't read no other book this year, read this book. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to stop right here because my phone's going dead. Battery's going dead. I wanted to come to you, and I'm going to come to you as often as I can. And I will be reading this slave code. in theory and in practice. Because I think that we need to really, really know what we're dealing with. I don't hate nobody. I love Native African Americans. I love my white brother. I'm not hating nobody. But the truth, I'm about the truth. I'm about my responsibility for history is to research and find the answers, find the solutions, and not make the same mistakes. I need us to realize that the African American or the Native African American is the most spiritual group of people in the world. We are the most ancient people in the world. When it comes down to colonialism, we're the only group of people in the world who are the physical resemblance of colonialism that was not destroyed or crushed. There have been many groups of people who are dead. The Indians almost wiped out. The Congolese and the indigenous from Australia. A lot of people are not here. Name the book. It was backwards. My fault. It's called The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice. The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice. It must be required reading for everybody in America, because we have not dealt with the code. I've called in a couple of radio stations and I asked the ministers, have they heard the code? They never heard the code. The American Slave Code in Theory and in Practice, because it's still being practiced today. We are the most ancient people in the world right now, according to colonialism. And we are reminded to the rest of the world that because of our ability to fast and pray and seek God's face, that's the only reason why we're still here. They've tried everything in their life. They've tried everything to destroy us, and we're still here. But with the use of social media and the cameras and television, they're sending images out around us, and they're changing the perception of who we were in the 60s, just less than 50 years to we need to be killed and slaughtered. I just think that we need to address the laws. We need to address the slave code. We need to have an honest conversation. And we need to let the chips fall wherever they fall. Again, I love black people. I have a special love for black people. But I have an even special love for the Native African Americans. Why? Because there's no other group of people in the world like us. What we've endured, or we had to endure, is the greatest Holocaust in the history of the world, even in your Bible. Because what our white brother did to us, they didn't do this in the Bible. It was forbidden to read, forbidden to write, forbidden to have family, forbidden to have a wife. You couldn't do nothing. So please share this. And I'm going to keep coming at you every week. Or when you see me come on, I'm talking about the slave code. I'm talking about something current. I'm talking about the issues. I think, again, we always talk about the 10 Commandments. But we never talk about the penal laws that subjected our great ancestors to. And I, for one, have a great love and appreciation for black people and my ancestors. And when you respect your ancestors will respect you. I tell people I got 3 levels of protection. I've got the ancestors who constantly remind me to never forget. I got my angels. The scripture says the angels are the ministering spirits to the heirs of salvation. I'm an heir. And I got the ancients, a body of information and of knowledge that was left for us, that we've been persuaded not to investigate, not to look into. And the ancients, the same ones that built the pyramids, the Great Sphinx, are still among us. Yes. But because we won't turn the television off, the radio off, and we have so many distractions, we can't tap into that frequency. It's like right now, if you turn on your radio right now, you got AM and FM, right? You turn on your AM, there will be an AM station pop up. You can't hear it. You know that an AM frequency comes on. You flip it to FM, that's an FM station come up. But if you always having a distraction, if you always doing something, going somewhere, and never still yourself, be quiet, get back into nature, you're going to always be looking at what you see. What you don't see is more profound than what you see. What you see is the final result of what was inside somebody's imagination, somebody's mind. Right now, those curtains behind me, this chair I'm sitting in, that person could be dead. But it's the final result of his vision that I'm a part of. So what I don't see is more real than what I do see. I'm doing what I'm doing right now because I feel it's just, hey, what's up, Yvonne and all those just tuned in. It's important because I think this is one of the last, we have yet to deal with the slave codes. And I think that a lot of what we do is locked into our DNA. And a lot of what white folks do is in their DNA at the cellular level. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You could be doing something, you could be asleep, but you tuned in and hear me out. I just pray that you share this with somebody. I will be reading this, just reading the books, just reading. The ancestors said, just read. Because the information just falls off the page. This is one book that brought me to tears. Because in our DNA is locked the struggles, the sorrows, the pain, the joy, the happiness of our ancestors. And never forget, it's not a suggestion. It's a command. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Cut back on the television. Cut back on the radio, even the gospel. Because now it's not even gospel music, it's gossip. And just still yourselves. Get quiet. Again, take your shoes off and your socks and go for a walk outside and connect with the earth again. God made us, the Creator made us the protectors of the earth. We are sons of God. We are sons of God. He put us in the garden. You can order the book through Amazon. Get it all Amazon. If you got Prime, you can have that book in 2 days. I got it from Amazon. But 2 books. Get that book and get David Walker's Appeal. Because I'm gonna follow up with this book too. I'm gonna read both of them. Because I know we don't read no more. We are quick entertainment. We don't have the attention span. But this is not for the older generation per se. This is for the younger generation. The ones, in 25 years, I'll be 75. And this is for these 25-year-olds who'll be 50. And I'm trying to leave something for them. For them. Again, I thank everybody for tuning in. I bless you. I pray for you. I pray that heaven smile upon you. I want nothing but your success for your health and your wealth and your mind. I can't even find words. I can't. Because because again, you can't read what I've just read, and it doesn't affect you eternally. It doesn't internally affect you. You know, this is not just statutes and amendments. These are events that took place to our people, and I'm very affected by that. Again, share this video. I'm going to post it on YouTube, but I will be talking about the slave code for a minute, and I'm going to chase it with David Walker's Appeal, two of the most relevant books now in the 21st century that every black person should read. Again, thank you for tuning in. Keep me in prayer. And my family. And my friends. When you're trying to stand for righteousness, you come under attack, but it's okay. I got the best AAA protection that any man could ask for. The ancestors, the angels, and the ancients. I love you. And I want heaven to smile upon you. Write me at juanjohn29@gmail.com. That's juanjohn29@gmail.com. And we're going to get through this. I promise you. Remember this. It is not how much you know. It's how much you care. Share this, share this, share this. Probably one of the most important books that nobody's ever read, that we're not reading, that we need to read. And you'll see why we act the way we act and why our white brother do what he do. It's embedded in their hearts. It's in their hearts. Okay? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Get some rest. Talk to you soon. God bless you. Thank you, everybody. Sean and Ivy and Yvonne. And I see you, Monica and Steve and Carol, Dory, Michelle, my brothers online, Rome, Randy. And if I missed anybody, charge it to my head, not to my heart. I'm going to do this more than once a week. It's just that important. What's up, Scotty? I guess Scotty's on board. Because it's just that important. And I'll be doing some current events too. Family, listen to me. Again, I don't watch a lot of TV, if any. I don't listen to a lot of radio. I work, I read, and then so I'm on a whole different frequency. I'm not with this whole. I'm on a whole different frequency. That's all I can say. I'm gonna leave it right there. Get the book. And remember, it is not how much you know. It's how much you care.